I got the message at 2:48 a.m. EM, Oslo time. I'm gone. Don't look for me. I've moved to Miami with Brian. I've also transferred all the money to my personal account. Good. Attached was a screenshot of our joint account balance. A cold, flat 3.00 sat beneath the bank's logo. No explanation, no warning. Just a clean stab to the chest. Right after I'd finished my third straight shift at the offshore wind site in Norway, I stared at my phone until the glow felt like it was burning straight through my skull. My head buzzed, my throat felt dry, like every breath weighed a ton. No yelling, no punching steel walls. I simply set the phone on the edge of my bunk, stood up and walked into the tiny bathroom I shared with two other engineers. Cold water splashed over my face, blurring everything, except the eerie stillness creeping through my chest. 7 years ago, Rachel and I opened that account together. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every investment went through it. We had plans, trust, and a life I thought was solid enough not to shatter from a single message, but it shattered anyway. I went back to the bunk, sat down. In the dim cabin light, my two roommates snored steadily. I typed one short line. No exclamation, no drama. Good luck. Then I powered off the phone. When I walked into the control room at 6 a.m., no one said anything but Luis, the operations lead, kept glancing at me, like he expected an explanation. I said nothing. We were running diagnostics on turbine number 11, one of the largest in Northern Europe, and I didn't have time for heartbreak. Each blade was over 200 feet long, spinning so smoothly you'd never guess one wrong input could tear everything apart for miles. The only thing being torn apart that morning was my life. During lunch break, I opened my email. No surprise, Rachel had already filed for divorce and accused me of abandoning the marriage because I worked too far from home. She included the name of a lawyer, Marvin Klein, a specialist in high asset separations. She also listed a demand for alimony and compensation for emotional distress. Her signature at the bottom came with a little heart emoji, like this was some pop song breakup from the 2000s. I didn't respond, not because I was weak, because I saw this coming since last month. That was when Rachel started locking her screen when texting, even while sitting right next to me on the couch. When she suddenly had a new art project that kept her from going to Sunday service with me. And when I started seeing transfers on the statement, small at first, then larger, with no names, no descriptions. Then came the early morning text from the woman who'd slept beside me for 11 years. I wrote one email, not to her, to Ryan, my cousin, meeting, an accountant working out of Boston. Subject line, initiate Project Neptune. A minute later, Ryan's reply came in. Ready since last week. Stay silent until you're stateside. He drafted that plan 5 years earlier, after I watched a colleague get wiped out in 72 hours by his ex-wife post-divorce. I swore I'd never be victim number 2. Every time I signed a new overseas contract, I'd wire 60% of my income into a separate account, tucked under a legal shell entity that Ryan had built. No laws broken, no tax evasion, just airtight discretion between the two of us. The shell company, North Pine Ventures. A blend of the river name back in Montana where I grew up, and the pine forest behind my mother's old house. That is balance. $1,280,000. Rachel had no clue it existed, and that fact alone was going to end her little game far sooner than she expected. I walked out of the control center after my shift, my head still thick with a mix of numbness and ruthless focus. Light snow had begun falling outside the port in Stavanger where the cargo vessel was docked. I stood alone by the rail, my dry fingers rubbing the frayed edge of my work ID badge. I was 43 then, not some naive dreamer, not the kind of man who collapses from betrayal, even when it comes from the only person I ever called family. The phone stayed off. Rachel's message and that drained account balance were etched into my memory, every digit frozen across my vision. I didn't need to check further. She'd taken everything systematically, in waves, probably for months, maybe longer. Back in my cabin, I powered up a separate laptop, never used for work, never for personal browsing. It only turned on for emergencies. I logged into an encrypted inbox known only to me and Ryan. No fluff. Proceed to phase 2, verify transfers, seal the perimeter, do not reply here. I encrypted the message, hit send, then deleted all drafts and activity logs. Every action flowed like muscle memory, rehearsed 100 times, though this was the one time it truly mattered. That afternoon, I went to the port to grab a coffee. No one noticed I had just marked the end of a marriage that lasted over a decade. I didn't feel sad, not anymore. All that remained was the cold ash of a flame I once thought would burn forever. 3 days later, I received an encrypted file from Ryan through our internal app. Inside was a statement of recent transactions from our joint account, transfers Rachel had made. Every one of them was flagged. Small, regular amounts slowly moved into another account under her maiden name, Rachel Coleman. Total amount gone in just 4 months, $186,000. But that wasn't all. She had also mortgaged the condo in Denver, which was jointly owned, to take out a $50,000 cash loan, forged signature. The loan was handled by a private lending firm with notoriously weak verification protocols. I dropped onto the edge of the bed, not out of shock, but because of how precisely calculated it all was. Rachel didn't just leave. She dismantled my life, brick by brick, then quietly pushed me out of the home I thought we had built together. Ryan had included a note. You'll want to hear this too. An audio clip followed, pulled from the internal security system of the condo Rachel assumed was disconnected. Her voice came through the speaker. He's still in Norway, 2 more weeks until he's back. That's enough time to finish everything. Then, disappear. The man's voice replied with a mocking laugh. We just need him to stay gone. I'll handle the rest. I clenched my fist, fingernails digging into my skin. I didn't recognize the voice, but the tone, the smug certainty, jogged something I'd overlooked. Brian, the name in the message, was a personal trainer at the gym Rachel had started going to 3 years ago. She hired him to help her get in shape. Good-looking guy, clearly used to living off other people's money. I read the rest of Ryan's report. The guy had been sued for breaking up a marriage, 2 civil investigations, one suspected of helping move assets to offshore accounts. No convictions, but enough to show he wasn't just some amateur. Everything was starting to line up like high noon over the Nevada desert. Rachel hadn't just left me. She was trying to erase me from everything we'd ever shared. Property, reputation, even my identity. I didn't text her, didn't call, didn't need any explanations. I needed proof. I needed the law. More than anything, I needed silence. Silence is what gives power to a checkmate. It's the quiet that makes the prey flinch. I let everything play out like I was still unaware. Still offshore, still focused on turbines, still the old Matthew. Just another energy engineer, blind to the trap being laid under his name. Step by step, line by line. Only this time, I was the one flipping the board behind the scenes. I met Rachel on an October afternoon in a tiny bookstore in Asheville, North Carolina. I was waiting for a bus back home after attending a wind energy conference nearby. She wore a burgundy sweater, light curls falling over her shoulders, deep in a debate with the store owner over a novel I happened to be holding too. When she turned to me, her gray eyes lit up, as if she had already read my thoughts before I could say hello. 32, divorced once, worked in internal communications for a nonprofit focused on community education. Confident, witty, independent, Rachel was the kind of woman who walked into a room and redirected every gaze without even trying. I was 2 years older, having just left a project in California and preparing for a 12-month contract in Scotland. We had coffee that same evening. Then met again 3 more times within the week. On the 4th meeting, I told her about my plan to work overseas for a couple of years, build savings, then buy land near the Blue Ridge Mountains. Rachel didn't hesitate. She laughed and said, I don't need a man who's always home. I need one with a plan. We got married 11 months later at a riverside farm. My friend said she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Hers called me crazy for walking away from a stable job to live among giant wind turbines in the middle of nowhere. We didn't care. Back then, the world felt like it had folded into the space between us, two people who believed love was enough. The first years really were good. I sent money home regularly, called whenever I had service, mailed handwritten letters from port stops. Rachel told me everything about new coworkers, about the lavender plant she'd finally grown in the backyard. Every time I came home from a long assignment, she was there at the airport, holding a scribbled sign that read, "He's home." But things slowly veered off course. No fights, no shattering drama, just subtle changes that eventually opened into a deep, quiet gulf. Around year 6 of our marriage, Rachel stopped sharing the little details. She was busier, her texts shorter, her tone more polite than personal. I told myself it was work. Maybe she was finally opening her own studio like she'd always dreamed. But even video calls became rare. She blamed bad internet or said she was in a meeting or didn't want me to see her looking a mess. One night, I called unexpectedly. She didn't pick up. An hour later, one word came through: sleeping. That night, I didn't sleep either. After returning home from a rotation in the Netherlands, I found that Rachel had completely changed the living room furniture. The brown leather sofa I loved was gone, replaced by a cold white Scandinavian-style set. I sat down and asked her why. Rachel simply said, "We need a new vibe." I didn't ask further. I should have. The next month, our credit card statement showed strange charges: luxury watches, VIP event tickets, expensive European cosmetics. Rachel said they were gifts for clients. I stayed quiet. I wanted to believe her. That was my biggest mistake. One day, while getting ready to fly to Sweden, I noticed a premium gym membership card in Rachel's wallet. Odd thing was, the gym was 20 miles from our house, while there was a newer one just 2 blocks away. She said, "I like the trainer there." I forced myself to believe that. That night, in a hotel room in Gothenburg, I saw Faust for the first time, a photo of an unfamiliar man in the shared iCloud album Rachel used for our family. A younger guy with a sharp haircut and tight workout shirt, posing next to Rachel at a sports event I knew nothing about. I looked up the gym's name, then the man in the photo. He was the head trainer. His name was Brandon Hale. 28? Everything after that fell like a line of dominoes. Rachel's computer search history contained keywords like splitting assets in divorce, how to prove financial control, and short-term investments not reported. That's when it hit me. None of this was random. It was planned, intentional. Love doesn't die in a single moment. It dies quietly when someone stops wanting to come home. And clearly, Rachel had left long before I noticed. 4 days after the betrayal message, Ryan sent me an encrypted file, heavier than anything I'd ever received. I opened it during the night shift while most of the wind station hummed under turbine noise and cold air scraping the metal walls. The subject line was clear: financial movements urgency level 9/10. I scrolled through each item like a razor to the skin. Total amount Rachel had siphoned from our joint account: $241,000. Not the 186 I had first seen. It started with small amounts: 2,000, then 4,500, then 7,800. Moved every few weeks to a bank account under the name Coleman R. In the last 60 days, the pace accelerated like a planned escape. But it didn't stop there. Rachel had mortgaged our Denver condo twice. The first was legal, the second done through a small lending company in Arizona. That loan? $48,000. Approved in 72 hours, using a forged signature. My name, but scribbled just convincingly enough to fool a lazy loan officer. Then came the part that chilled me. Ryan discovered she had changed the beneficiary on my life insurance, replacing our names with someone else. Landon Hart. I'd never heard that name before. But after a quick search, Ryan sent me the file. Landon, 29, former personal trainer, worked at the gym Rachel had gone to for 3 years. Quit 3 months ago, following an inappropriate relationship with a client, reported internal. Attached was a photo. That was Brandon Hale, the same guy Rachel called Brian in her goodbye text. He didn't even bother using a fake legal name. I let out a dry laugh, not from amusement, but at how clumsy and bold their scheme was. An old trick, replayed by people who thought no one else would catch on. Ryan followed up with another short report. He's been involved in 3 divorces, 2 ended with the woman losing everything. 1 is still under civil suit for using a credit card in someone else's name. No convictions, but the pattern is clear. Professional predator. I sat still for a while, not blinking. Memories with Rachel felt like pages being torn down the spine of a book. Ryan didn't say much. We understood each other in silence. In the final file, he included scanned documents, the beneficiary change form, the second mortgage application, and even a photo of the fake driver's license used in the loan process. I studied the signature, sloppy but close enough to pass with inattentive staff. Toward the end of the file, Ryan added, "If you're ready to strike back, I suggest we move the moment you return to the States. I've prepared everything: fraud, unauthorized transfers, forged documents. Just move smart. Don't reveal yourself yet." I shut the screen and leaned back in the chair. It was nearly 3 a.m. Wind howled outside the steel frame like it was daring me to make the first move. I never thought I'd be the main character in a story like this. A decent man, hardworking, suddenly thrown out of his own life by the person he once trusted most. But no, I wasn't going to be the victim. I didn't message Rachel, didn't ask why or what were you thinking. I already knew the answer. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. I opened my private inbox and sent one line to Ryan's lawyer in Austin. "Initiate proceedings. Do not disclose my location under any circumstance." Within hours, I received 2 more files. One was Rachel's latest transaction summary, $15,000 withdrawn at Orlando International Airport. The other showed 2 one-way tickets to Key West, Florida, under the names Rachel Coleman and Landon Hart. Departure next week. I didn't need any more proof. They didn't just want to vanish. They planned to build a new life using my money. Maybe even sell the house, liquidate everything, wipe the slate clean before I ever made it home. Only thing is, I was already home. They just didn't know it yet. 1 week after getting my hands on the full documentation of Rachel's fraudulent transactions, I stepped off the plane in Houston under the scorching May sun. The heat slammed into my face but sharpened my focus to an icy edge. Ryan was waiting, face stern, leather case in hand. We didn't say much, just nodded and got in the car. The ride headed down the highway toward Attorney Thomas's office. On the way, I thought about the past 8 years. How every time I landed a big offshore contract, I'd set aside part of the payout into a company account that only Ryan and I knew about. At first, I thought it would just cover emergency costs. But over time, the funds built up, like honey slowly filling a jar in the back corner of a kitchen. The shell company was called North Pine Ventures. Ryan created it in 2017 based on a piece of land my grandmother owned in Montana, acres of dense pine forest where I used to camp as a kid. No laws broken, no tax evasion, just a personal investment firm. Fully declared, but completely separate from any marital assets. When the car stopped in front of the 7-story glass building, I could feel it in my steps. This wasn't like any walk I'd taken before. There was no hesitation in my chest. What I needed now was a clean counterstrike, one that would show Rachel and her jobless trainer exactly what the cost of betrayal looked like. Thomas was already waiting in the conference room. A thick folder sat on the table. He shook my hand. "You ready?" I nodded, set down the leather bag. Thomas opened the North Pine Ventures statement. Current balance, $1,625,000. That number wasn't just money. It was a battle plan I'd been quietly building, year after year, in every corner of the world I worked. A shield against surprise attacks, a warhead waiting to detonate. Thomas continued, "We're going to file for asset theft, signature fraud, and tampering with insurance beneficiaries. At the same time, I'll file a criminal case against Devon, the trainer, for fraud." I gave a small smile, like someone handed a sword. But my voice stayed calm. "I want every exit sealed. I want them to pay in full." Half an hour later, we were back at Ryan's place, a penthouse in the financial district. Ryan showed me the divorce agreement Rachel had filed from Denver. She demanded a division of assets, monthly support, and full use of the condo. No mention of North Pine Ventures. Because she didn't know it existed. I sat down, ran my fingers over the contract. We'll file a countersuit to keep North Pine out of the marital pool. It's clearly an independent business asset. Ryan nodded. Already prepared. Transaction logs, deposit contracts, and separate tax filings since day one. Then my private phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. Final directive, tomorrow at 9 a.m., show up at Orange County Court. Act like it's your first time back. I replied with a single word. Okay. Then turned to Ryan. What about the criminal case? He tapped a few keys on his laptop, then showed me the search warrant for Rachel's residence. Investigators are ready. Unauthorized transfers, forged documents, even the murder plot texts, all greenlit. My smile widened. We'd held back for so long, planned every move, calculated every detail. Now it was time to strike. Fast, clean, with no mercy. That evening, city lights shimmered through the window as I sat alone on the balcony. The traffic below felt distant, like noise behind glass. Inside me, nothing but silence before the storm. I thought about Rachel. The woman who once shared every dream with me, who used to wait with that scribbled "You're home" sign at the airport. Now she'd betrayed every ounce of trust and plotted to erase me. But I knew the only way to shut every escape route was to use the one thing she never expected: strategy. North Pine Ventures wasn't created out of greed. It existed so I'd always have the right to live, to walk away free, and to strike back fairly. My own treasure. Untouchable. The next morning, I arrived at court, stepping past heavy wooden doors, my frame tall, my navy suit sharp enough to catch glances. I entered the courtroom, stood beside Thomas, facing Rachel and Devon, her trainer now looking confused and exposed. Light poured through the windows, right onto the pile of documents I carried in. When the judge struck the gavel, the voice echoed. Emergency hearing on divorce and asset restraint. Defense. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath and offered a calm, confident smile. The war was just beginning, but I held the secret weapon, $1,625,000, meticulously protected inside North Pine Ventures. Now no one could take that from me. That afternoon at Thomas's office, I sat between the two men I trusted most, Ryan, my cousin who'd worked behind the scenes for years, and Thomas, the seasoned attorney who had seen too many war rooms to flinch. Outside, clouds gathered low like the storm had hurt us. Inside, the real storm had already formed. Paper. Thomas unzipped his leather case, pulled out the game plan. Each line on each page struck like the rhythm of a requiem for Rachel. We'll file the conditional divorce petition tomorrow morning, he said, voice steady like a judge's gavel. At the same time, we'll motion to freeze every account tied to her name, the joint assets, third-party holdings, and anything transferred in the past 12 months. I nodded, eyes locked on the pages. Ryan slid over another document. Text threads from iCloud, where Rachel left a trail using my old Apple ID. Her messages with Brandon, the fake Brian, outlined every step of how they'd planned to destroy me financially and personally. One part chilled me to the bone. Rachel, what if the insurance won't pay because there's no confirmed death? Branda said. Then we go with Plan B. You're still the legal wife, you can access info and act on it. Rachel, I don't know, you mean if Matthew disappears? Brandon, industrial accidents happen all the time, especially offshore. Don't make me choose for you. My grip tightened on the chair. Thomas placed a calm hand on my shoulder and spoke clearly. This is evidence of attempted murder conspiracy. With this, we're not just going after financial crimes. We'll push for criminal prosecution over intent to harm for insurance gain. Before I could answer, Thomas pulled out another file. She also filed a complaint with Jefferson County Court accusing you of emotional abuse, financial control, and tax threats. She's using it to request a restraining order and full access to the condo. I let out a laugh. not amused but stunned at how brazen Rachel's play had become. So they're trying to paint me as abusive? Steal the condo, seize the assets, and walk away clean? I asked. Thomas nodded. She doesn't know you're back in the US. No one does except us. That's your biggest advantage. Ryan cut in. The security camera system at the Denver condo is still active. I accessed it remotely. Over the past 2 weeks, Brandon's shown up almost every day, coming and going like he owns the place. In several clips, he's wearing your clothes, driving your car, even answering calls using a voice that mimics yours. I froze. Ryan showed me the clip. That man sitting on my familiar sofa, holding my glass of whiskey, smiling into the phone as he said, "Yeah, this is Matthew, everything's fine, still in Norway." A sloppy impersonation, a calculated scam. I turned to Thomas. Can we charge him for impersonation to mislead identity? He nodded. We can, and more. If we prove they intentionally misled financial institutions by impersonating you to access bank accounts, that's federal-level fraud. I closed my eyes briefly. Every step they took, I saw it clearer now than ever before. But I wouldn't fight back with rage. I'd let the law, the evidence, and the truth come crashing down on them, blow after blow, without mercy. So what's next? I asked. Thomas pulled out his phone. Just got word. Judge approved an emergency hearing for Tuesday morning. We'll file the countersuit with all evidence, texts, videos, financial records, location logs, and documents showing you weren't even in the US during the time she claimed you were threatening her. If the court agrees, all assets will be frozen immediately. I stood and walked toward the window. The city outside buzzed like usual. But inside me, everything had gone quiet, replaced by a strange calm. I wouldn't fight with emotion, I'd fight with precision. They didn't know I was back. They didn't know how many pieces I'd already moved. And the one thing they definitely didn't see coming was that I was ready to raise the curtain, where every actor would be stripped bare. I sat in Ryan's car, parked behind an old, white delivery truck, just a narrow alley away from the condo I once called home. The dashboard clock read 8:47 a.m. Sunlight sliced across my face through the windshield like a silent blade. Through binoculars, I saw the third-floor door still shut. Pale blue curtains shifted slightly in the breeze. A black SUV sat at the curb, next to the white Lexus. Rachel's usual ride, before she transferred it to Brandon. At exactly 9 o'clock, an unmarked car pulled up. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out, followed by a woman holding a thick stack of documents and a small body cam on her chest. They moved quietly toward the gate. I didn't blink. A minute later, the door opened. Rachel appeared, hair tied up, wearing a white silk blouse, her face groggy like she'd just been woken up. She barely had time to process what was happening before the court officer opened the file and stated her name. The blow didn't come from a fist, but from her own signature on those papers. Unilateral divorce, emergency asset freeze, restraining order, document forgery charges, unlawful transfer, and conspiracy to defraud insurance. The moment she heard the name Matthew Grayson, Rachel froze. Brandon came into view from behind her, shirtless, eyes still half closed. He stepped forward, trying to act composed. "What's going on? Why are you people here?" One of the officers raised his hand. "Are you Brandon Hale?" He nodded. Seconds later, the cuff snapped around his right wrist. Rachel let out a breathless gasp. "You're being detained for questioning regarding identity fraud, financial conspiracy, and suspected insurance fraud," the officer said, firm and to the point. I opened the car door and stepped into the sunlight, standing just past the tree line. When Rachel looked up and met my eyes, she crumbled. Her body trembled like the temperature had dropped below 0. That look wasn't of someone caught. It was someone whose soul had just betrayed itself. I said nothing, just stood there. The way I used to stand on our balcony, waiting for her to come home. The way I used to watch her eyes when she dropped me off at the airport. Only this time, I wasn't carrying luggage. I was carrying justice. Police asked Rachel to gather a few personal items. Every piece was inspected before leaving the condo. My family's silver photo frames, the heirloom watch from my grandfather, all taken as evidence. I didn't step inside. I didn't need to. Thomas arrived just as investigators sealed the bedroom safe. He handed me the court's confirmation, temporary suspension of property control. The house sale was nullified. Rachel's bank accounts were frozen within 24 hours. As Rachel was escorted out, she looked back at me one last time. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes hollow. I didn't respond. No need. Whether she ever loved me, whether Brandon truly cared, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that the law had spoken. The police car disappeared down the intersection, taking with it the last breath of what used to be our life. Ryan walked up beside me, handed me the coffee he'd picked up earlier. I took it, breathed deep. It started with a text, I said, and ended with a signature, Ryan replied, his gaze calm. We stood there a little longer, quietly watching the empty apartment door, as if we were looking at the wreckage of a ship pulled ashore. A memory sealed shut. The sky that day wasn't clear, but it wasn't fully gray either, just clear enough for me to realize dawn isn't always brilliant, but it still arrives not a second late. Just like the truth, no matter how long it's buried, it eventually steps into the light. Courtroom 12, Jefferson County Courthouse, Tuesday morning. Outside, a light breeze passed over dusty stone steps. Inside, everything was arranged meticulously, like a stage set for the final act of a fraudulent play. Rachel sat on the opposite side, dressed in a dark outfit, trying to stay composed, but unable to hide the glisten in her eyes. The chair next to her was empty. Brandon, the one who once called himself her emotional support, was nowhere to be found. According to county police, he had left the state immediately after being released under conditional investigation. No phone, no email, no trace. Another classic getaway, just like he'd done with other women before. Judge Miller, a woman in her 60s with a stern yet sharp face, opened the session with a calm voice. This hearing concerns the divorce between Mr. Matthew Grayson and Miss Rachel Coleman, and will also review evidence related to document forgery, financial fraud, and organized deception. Thomas stood and presented the file. A sequence of indisputable proof. Account statements, mortgage documents with forged signatures, texts about Plan B, and a list of assets transferred illegally. Alongside was a financial report from North Pine Ventures, proving the funds were lawfully accumulated and entirely separate from marital property. Mr. Grayson's assets are not only fully declared, Thomas stated clearly, but transparently managed, with proper tax filings and no indication of evasion or abuse of the law. Rachel's attorney could only offer weak defenses. Claims that she was just influenced, that her actions were due to emotional instability from a prolonged marriage, quickly withered under the judge's steady gaze. Judge Miller flipped through the file, pausing at the text messages between Rachel and Brandon, especially the part where they discussed not needing Plan A if Matthew didn't return on schedule. After a few minutes of silence, she removed her glasses and looked directly at the defendant. Miss Coleman, are you aware of the seriousness of your actions? Her tone wasn't angry, but firm enough to silence the entire room. Rachel lowered her head, whispering, I was manipulated. I didn't mean to hurt Matthew. You planned to drain all assets, impersonate his signature, and even discussed exploiting life-threatening risks to claim insurance benefits. Judge Miller emphasized each final word. If this isn't organized fraud, I don't know what is. The ruling was delivered at 11:22 a.m. The judge's voice echoed through the speakers. Based on the evidence presented, the court rules. Ms. Rachel Coleman is not entitled to any financial support or division of assets. All property under Mr. Grayson through North Pine Ventures is confirmed as separate. All transfers from the joint account are voided, and recovered funds shall be returned to Mr. Grayson's account. Matters involving forgery, insurance fraud conspiracy, and financial deception will be forwarded to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Sole ownership of the Denver condo is granted to Mr. Matthew Grayson. Ms. Coleman is prohibited from approaching Mr. Grayson within 500 feet until further notice. I sat still in that moment, neither elated nor angry, just as if someone had finally lifted a stone that had been pressing on my chest for years. Rachel never looked back at me. She hurried out of the courtroom, leaving only the echo of her heels and whatever was left of her dignity. Thomas turned to me and said quietly, "We did everything by the book." I didn't reply. I thought of all the years spent offshore, the nights filled with waves and brief emails from the woman I once loved. I once thought I had lost everything the day Rachel sent that final message, but now I understood. Real loss is when you can't stand back up after the fall. I was still standing, head held high, walking out of that courtroom as the only man fully in control of his life. Not because of luck, but because I prepared, because I didn't act on emotion, I acted on evidence. This victory didn't thrill me, it simply confirmed one thing. I wasn't wrong for defending myself, even when I believed I'd never need to. That summer, I left Denver. No farewell party, no announcement. I left the condo keys with the law firm that would handle the sale. That place had once been home, later a crime scene, and finally, just a hollow shell filled with memories I no longer wished to touch. I drove north, through Wyoming, then Montana. My final stop tucked deep inside the Bitterroot Valley, where a quiet wooden cabin rested by Stillwater Lake. That land had been under North Pine's name for 5 years, an early investment no one paid attention to, not even Rachel. No neighbors out here, no car horns, only wind sweeping through pine trees and gentle ripples on the lake when storms passed through. I spent the first week tearing out old wiring, updating the kitchen, and building a small porch awning to read under in the evenings. Each morning, I woke up early, brewed coffee, and watched the sunlight creep across the lake. No pressure, no emails, no offshore deadlines or long flights. Every day began and ended on my terms, a freedom I'd spent nearly 30 years earning. One late afternoon, Thomas called. Rachel had received her final sentence, 5 years of probation and over $230,000 in civil restitution, covering legal fees, lost assets, and damage to reputation. Her attorney admitted the chances of her paying it off were nearly zero. Evan, the trainer who once dreamed of becoming a millionaire, was now wanted in 2 other states for romance-based financial fraud. The latest news from the district attorney's office in Nevada reported that one of his victims had lost her entire retirement fund. When police arrived at his rented apartment in Reno, all they found was a torn gym bag and a ripped wall calendar. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel vindicated. Just like a chapter had quietly closed. No need to turn it again. One afternoon, I received a call from a technical director at a Canadian wind power company. They offered me a senior advisory role for an offshore project in Nova Scotia. Good pay, flexible hours, remote work. I sat in silence for a long time after hanging up. The wind from the lake pushed through the curtains, carrying the scent of pine and cold water. I poured another glass of tea, turned on an old jazz record, and let out a quiet laugh. Some doors open just to teach you how to walk away, not to go back. I declined the offer. This new life had no Rachel, no Brandon, and no more midnight calls about turbine malfunctions in the middle of the sea. Instead, I had time to grow vegetables in the small garden behind the house, chop wood for winter, and finally write down stories I'd only ever drafted in my mind. I also began restoring my grandfather's antique watch, the one Rachel had hidden during her asset shuffle. It now sat neatly on my desk, each ticking second reminding me that while time can't be reversed, I could choose how to live every minute. One day, I received a package from Ryan. Inside was the official dissolution notice for North Pine Ventures. The assets had been transferred to a personal investment portfolio, all tax obligations completed. Ryan included a handwritten note. The plan is over, but the lessons stay. I folded the letter and set it next to my bourbon glass on the table. Through the glass window, Stillwater Lake looked calm, strangely so. Something inside me had settled too, not because everything was fine, but because I was no longer bound by things I couldn't control. That night, sitting in the wooden chair I'd built myself, I looked up at the stars. A question that had haunted me for months suddenly resurfaced. Did I live it right? I didn't answer out loud. I simply raised my glass toward the quiet night in front of me. Life truly begins when you learn how to rise from what you thought had ended. Matthew's story is proof that betrayal can come from the person closest to you. But with preparation and resilience, you can still stand back up and take control of your life. He didn't choose revenge through anger, but instead used silence, reason, and the law to claim justice. In the end, Matthew didn't just reclaim his assets, he reclaimed the right to live a peaceful, independent life that no betrayer could ever take away. What do you think of Matthew's decision? Would you have done something differently? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more surprising and meaningful family stories to come.